Breaking news into HQ, NBA in the midst of the conference finals announcing their all-NBA teams. Here's your first team right here. They are the top five. Devin Booker, Luka Doncic, Jason Tatum, Giannis, and Nikola Jokic. That's two-time MVPs. The last four MVPs in the league are first-teamers, and you could see a pair of guards, a pair of forwards, and a center on that first team. Let's get some insight. Bring in Bill Reiter. And Bill, first team, second team, third team announced. You just saw that first team. Your initial impressions?
A couple, Jim. I voted for NBA All-Team, first, second, and third team, and that's the exact ballot that I had. And I was curious how the rest of the voters would go because it was a pretty excruciating decision this year. The NBA gave voters the choice to put players who play center in effect at forward. So the real question was, what do you do with Joel Embiid, who finished second, by the way, in the MVP voting? You're allowed to put him at forward. I was tortured over this. I spent a lot of time talking to GMs and former players and folks, and in the end decided to put him at forward, which made him second behind Jokic, even though for me he was the third best player in the league this year. So I think the All-NBA first team looks right. But I think it's also interesting, the guy that finished second in the MVP voting did end up on the second All-NBA team, even though voters could have, I didn't do this, and neither did most, put him on the first team if they'd chosen.
Yeah, that's a great point there. And that second team had Steph, DeMar DeRozan of the Bulls, Ja Morant, Kevin Durant, and the aforementioned Joel Embiid. LeBron James, a third-teamer. LeBron James, 56 games played. Kevin Durant, 55 games played. As a voter, how much did that fall under consideration for you in terms of how many games they actually played?
It's a great question. It was another really difficult part of the process. Normally when I'm voting for MVP or Coach of the Year, I'll reach out to a whole bunch of agents and GMs and players and folks that I want feedback. All-NBA team usually feels fairly intuitive. This year was the same process going through voting for MVP. For me, I voted LeBron and Kevin Durant both in the second team. They, as you said, basically played the same number of games. I also had Trae Young on my All-NBA second team and bumped Ja Morant down to third team. It was hard. I know some folks that I talked to, some voters that I talked to, did not think that Durant and LeBron played enough. I understand that 55, 66 game range. You're missing basically almost 30 games. For me, their excellence, their dominance when they're on the floor was enough to get them to that second team.
You know, a third team also had Chris Paul, Trae Young, the aforementioned LeBron James, Pascal Siakam, as well as Karl Anthony Towns. So you know the three respective teams. Bill, any obvious omissions from your perspective?
There are. I think most of that list is right. I had Chris Paul on my third team, All-NBA third team as well. This is, you know, Jim, this is sort of like March Madness where, you can quibble over the 1 and the 2 seeds. It's who gets left out that's the most excruciating decision-making. I had Jimmy Butler at forward on my All-NBA third team at the expense of Pascal Siakam. And I understand and I recognize why Siakam is where he is. For me, Jimmy Butler was in effect the MVP of the Miami Heat, who finishes the 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. Obviously, now it's not a postseason award and we can't see the future, but the Heat are still playing. So for me, just projecting what Jimmy Butler had meant to the Heat in terms of getting to the playoffs and where they are now, what I thought would happen, and just his impact on that team, the team that won the Eastern Conference. I had Butler ahead of Siakam, but it's a matter of degrees, my friend. It's so difficult making those decisions.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Bill, I'm curious. MVP voting, you've seen it with Joel Embiid over the last few years. It matters to the players. They get bothered and they make it known. I'm curious what the players' reaction is to making all first team, all second team, if it matters to them as much.
It does. It is significant. Now, if you're in the stratosphere of Nikola Jokic or Joel Embiid or Giannis Antetokounmpo or the other guys over the years, Steph Curry, LeBron James, maybe the All-NBA team doesn't matter as much because if you're in that conversation, you're going to be on the All-NBA first team, or maybe if you're a center like Embiid, you're going to be a center on the second team if you're the second best center in the game. But to the rest of the guys in the league, Jim, I think it makes a big difference. It does impact contracts. It can affect things like bonuses and how much money they're up for. And, you know, what you learn when you get the ability to vote for these things. I didn't realize this till I got to vote 10 or 15 years ago. is that players really care about these honors and about being recognized and about being valued, and the responsibility you have to vote properly and fairly, is real, because you'll hear from guys, postseason in the locker room based on the way you do and don't vote.
He's Bill Reiter, our CBS NBA insider. Bill, we always appreciate the insight. All right, here's what it looks like with regards to those first and second teams. And as I mentioned, a pair of MVPs, two-time MVPs on that first team. The last 4 MVPs in the NBA, Giannis and Nikola Jokic. And the newcomers to the block, if you will, young guns, if Devin Booker, Luka Doncic, and Jason Tatum, they are taking the league by storm. Your second team, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Joel Embiid, Ja Morant, and DeMar DeRozan. And as Bill mentioned, what's interesting here is it didn't have to be position specific. So the player who was second in MVP voting could have been a first-teamer in Joel Embiid.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.